Today is President's Day, and while the wind sways the iced-over flags on the main street of our little town, I sit here on my porch and remember that February morning, 40 years ago, when I did something my colleagues called betrayal, and I call survival. I saw entire towns in Ohio commit collective suicide without even realizing it. They didn't jump off bridges. They simply refused to leave rooms that had long since been engulfed in flames. I'm 84, and in 60 years of industrial consulting, I learned to recognize that specific smell, a mix of cheap coffee, rust, and animal fear of tomorrow. You know, I have the moral right to say this because I'm that same old Mark who saw our steel heart turn to ash. I saw men, strong as the pillars of the bridges over the Cuyahoga River, cry because the world around them began to change faster than they could tie the laces on their work boots. I learned one pattern that is more frightening than any economic crisis. People are capable of enduring pain that slowly kills them for years simply because that pain is familiar and native to them. But offer them a door to another life, and they will barricade it from the inside. Now, as snow covers the empty parking lots of shuttered factories, I feel the same tension as back then. Many think change is when something is taken away. In reality, change is when you're given a chance not to sink along with a ship that is already half filled with water. I was the one who jumped first, and I still remember the looks from the shore of those who stayed behind, waiting for better times that never came. But what I saw out there, beyond our small, safe world of suffering, forever changed my understanding of what a person is truly capable of when they finally stop clinging to the corpse of their past. Before I tell you what exactly I saw beyond our familiar world, tell me honestly, how long did you endure a situation that was destroying you simply because you were afraid to take a step into the unknown? Write in the comments, was it a year, 5, or a lifetime? It matters to me to know whether there are many of us here who understand the price of that waiting. Over these decades, I have watched the same mistake that people in our Ohio make with religious persistence. They confuse loyalty with suicide. I saw it hundreds of times in the workshops of Youngstown Sheet and Tube. When the furnaces began to cool, the men didn't go looking for new jobs. They gathered by the factory gates, warmed their hands over barrels with fire, and waited. They waited a year, 2, 5. They believed that if they suffered hard enough, the good old days would take pity and return. That was the first major pattern, the illusion that patience automatically means reward. But the market has no heart, and progress feels no nostalgia. Those who waited the longest eventually lost not only their jobs but also their homes, their families, and the remnants of their self-respect. They turned into shadows, wandering past empty factories, clinging to memories like life preservers that dragged them to the bottom. There was another thing, pride disguised as tradition. I remember my neighbor Bill. In the 80s, he was 45, the perfect age to start over. I told him then, Bill, steel will no longer feed Ohio. Let's go to Columbus. New logistics centers are opening there. They need people with your experience. He looked at me as if I had spat on the American flag. My grandfather worked those furnaces. My father died here, and I will be a steel worker or no one, he said. And he chose no one. He chose slow decay in the bar Rusty Anchor, where every evening turned into collective mourning for the past. This refusal to learn something new, this fear of becoming a beginner again at 40 or 50, that is the second pattern. People are more afraid of looking foolish in a new environment than they are of becoming unnecessary in the old one.
They choose an honorable death over uncomfortable renewal. The third pattern is how suffering becomes a comfort zone. Have you noticed how people in lines for social assistance or in hospitals start comparing their misfortunes? In our region, it became a national sport. If you say your back hurts, your neighbor will surely say his legs are giving out. We created a culture where being a victim of circumstances is almost a profession. When I tried to introduce new retraining programs, I faced not a lack of intelligence, but an unwillingness to leave that cozy cocoon of shared grief. After all, if you change your life and become successful in a new way, you automatically become a traitor to those who stayed behind to suffer. You destroy their justification that nothing can be done. I saw the consequences of these mistakes decades later. They show in the empty eyes of the grandchildren of those steelworkers who now sit on the same porches, but no longer with hope, with dull anger at the whole world. They inherited this fear of change like a genetic disease.
Our social system in Ohio is built so that you don't starve, but it will never push you toward the light unless you yourself decide to break the glass. The slow degradation of entire generations, that is the price of someone once being afraid simply to retrain for a new profession or move to another city. Today, on President's Day, when greatness is spoken of from television screens, I see only the boarded-up windows of main streets that stand as monuments to human stubbornness. It wasn't the economy that killed these towns. It was the fear that tomorrow might be different from yesterday. One scene is stuck in my memory. 1994, February. The same biting wind. I stood at the railway station and watched the last train carrying raw materials for our largest plant depart. Hundreds of men stood on the platform. They didn't shout, they didn't protest. They simply stood in silence. There was so much despair in that silence that the air itself seemed heavy. But the most terrifying thing was not that the plant had closed. The most terrifying thing was that not one of those men had a plan B. Until the very last second, they all hoped someone would come and save them from the need to change. For me, this story is not about them, those abstract people by the factory gates. It is about my sister, Sarah. She was 2 years younger than me, and in the entire county there was no one with a sharper mind. We grew up in this house in Ohio, counting freight cars that rushed past our garden, believing that their rumble was the heartbeat of the universe itself, one that would never stop. But when our town began to be covered in rust, we found ourselves on opposite sides of the abyss that I myself helped build. My pain is not the loss of money or status. My pain is watching a woman you love with all your heart voluntarily choose to fade away because she is afraid to betray the memory of her ancestors. Sarah was an amazing florist. She had a gift for feeling the earth. But she believed her place was at the cash register of the local department store that had fed 3 generations of our family. When I began studying new management systems, when I insisted we sell this house and move to Columbus, where life was just beginning, she looked at me as if I were suggesting burning our family photo album. I still remember our last Christmas evening in 1996. Outside, the same blizzard was raging as today. I was already working as a consultant helping large companies adapt to the digital era, and Sarah had been working for pennies for 2 years because the department store was nearly bankrupt and the new retail chains frightened her. She looked at my expensive coat with such bitterness that I felt cold in the warm house. "You've changed, Mark," she said then, and there was more fatigue than anger in her voice. "You've become a stranger. You survived because you threw away everything that made us part of this land." You traded roots for comfort. That was the moment I understood. The price of change is almost always loneliness. You don't just learn a new language or a new profession. You leave the tribe of those who decided to remain in the shadows, and they will not forgive you for it. I saw this contrast every year. I bought a new house, traveled, breathed deeply, while Sarah slowly faded in our old family nest, where the roof leaked and the walls remembered only better times. She refused any help because for her, accepting money from the new Mark meant admitting her defeat before time. She left early, at 62. The doctors spoke of exhaustion and a weak heart, but I know. She was simply tired of carrying on her shoulders a world that had long since fallen apart. At her funeral, I stood among neighbors who looked at me as a traitor. To them, I was a ghost, the one who adapted. And in their eyes, that was worse than death. This inner reflection still gnaws at me. Was I right? Were my new opportunities worth the last 10 years of my sister's life, during which we spoke only in short phrases about the weather? In our state, there are thousands of such torn families. One generation looks to the future, the other to the past, and between them lies a void that no justifications can fill. We have become a state of contrasts. Gleaming glass offices stand a few miles from ruins where people still wait for some strange justice that will return the 1970s to them. Time here does not heal, it only emphasizes the abyss. When I walk through the center of our town, I see young women with laptops in cafes that opened where the old bakery once stood. They are light, ready to change professions or cities in a single day. I envy their freedom from memories. But at the same time, I feel deep sadness because I know their lightness grew from the ashes of those who, like my Sarah, could not let go of the old world, who believed that learning to live in a new way meant ceasing to be themselves. The snow continues to fall, and in this silence I realize I do not want to give you any advice. Advice is what people give when they want to seem wise. And I am simply a man who has watched the world for too long. I am not going to convince you that change is easy. It is painful. It is frightening. It often means losing friends, former respect, and even part of your identity. But I have seen the alternative. I saw it in the eyes of my sister Sarah. I saw it in thousands of boarded-up windows across Ohio. We often think that by holding on to the old, we are saving ourselves. In reality, we are simply clinging to an anchor that drags us down with the ship. The world is neither evil nor kind. It simply moves. It is like this February blizzard outside my window. You can stand and curse the cold until you freeze to death, or you can learn to build a different house, with new walls and different heating. Learning to live in a new way is not a betrayal of the memory of the past. It is the only way to ensure that past was not in vain. Now it is completely quiet on my porch. The wind has died down and only the flags barely rustle in the frost. I look at my hands and see not old age, but the experience of overcoming. Perhaps the main mistake of our entire generation was that we valued stability more highly than development. We feared the unknown future so much that we allowed the familiar past to suffocate us. But life continues only where there is movement. What is truly more frightening, the risk of appearing a clumsy beginner in a new world, or absolute certainty that you are slowly dying in something that has long been dead? Thank you for sitting with me on this cold porch. If these old memories resonated somewhere deep inside you, leave a like. It will be pleasant for an old man to know he was heard. And subscribe if you would like to drop by for another conversation someday. Here in Ohio, the evenings are long, and I have enough stories for many more lifetimes.